exchange there. And now we come to the next session that will be on the main stage, the thinking about lean thinking part 4, paradox mindset. And we have here John Shook, Matt Savas, and Rachel. They will be sharing their experience in this. So guys, the whole event is here. This is the only activity happening this time of the day. So you have there the 30 minutes. See you soon.
Thanks, Chris. Hi, everybody. I'm Matt Savas from the Lean Enterprise Institute, and I'm excited to introduce our next speakers. First, we have John Shook. John spent 11 years with Toyota in Japan and the United States, helping transfer its production, engineering, and management systems globally. He became Toyota's first American manager in Japan and a senior manager at the Toyota Supplier Support Center, Toyota Production System Support Center, I think it's called these days. He's the co-author of Learning to See, which introduced value stream mapping, Kaizen Express, and he's the author of Managing to Learn, which introduced the world to A3 thinking. John served as CEO of Lean Enterprise Institute and the Lean Global Network. And as an industrial anthropologist with degrees from the University of Hawaii and Tennessee and the University of Tennessee, John has also won awards for articles on organizational change. And Rachel, her last day at Toyota will be November 22nd, which is tomorrow, I think, retiring after 37 years with the company. Congratulations, Rachel. During her career, she has worked in a variety of areas, including production control, TPS implementation, manufacturing, quality, data management, and administration, covering HR, accounting and finance, and facilities management. Sounds like you kind of ran the company there for those 37 years, Rachel. And she spent 5 years with a supplier focusing on sales and production planning, as well as leadership development. And in 2022, she earned a Doctor of Education in Organizational Change and Leadership from the University of Southern California. John and Rachel, I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Matt. And not sure if Matt, okay. Yes, let me just, first of all, again, kind of introduce Rachel. And Rachel, want to go to the very next slide, I guess. We don't need this here. Really, we want to get started. But yes, Rachel's last day with Toyota is tomorrow after 37 years. So I think everyone who has access to the little reaction thing there, you know, Rachel deserves a hand. So my reasons for inviting Rachel to join me, and I'm so happy that she agreed to do it. One is so everyone can meet Rachel. Another is some work that she's been doing related to this topic, and that will be something we'll talk about later. So this is the 4th year of the Lean Global Connection. And the 4th year that I've done something on, let's see, thinking about the thinking part of lean thinking in practice, because we don't think about that enough. So it's an exploratory session that we're doing that I did last year, and we're going to take it a lot further this year with Rachel's help. One of the things we did last year, we looked at the fact that, you know, in the old days before lean, many of you who have been around will remember people talked about quality, cost, and time, and they would say as a joke, which 2 out of the 3 do you want? Or maybe which 1 out of the 3 do you want? And in fact, in business, we need to do all of them. And there's tension there. Sometimes there are contradictions. There's a 3-way paradox going on. And then we also looked last year at this idea of transformation, of changing the system first or the culture first, recognizing that at the bottom there's this thing called way of thinking. And we had GTP, help us define what way of thinking is, recognizing that that's an important thing. As it also comes up in the Lean Transformation Framework, which you can see here just we won't spend a lot of time on it, but it's got 5 dimensions. It's been talked about a couple of times today, I believe, but at the bottom, there's this thing, the most foundational question of these fundamental questions is, what is our basic thinking? What is our mindset? So that's part of what we're exploring today, with how a paradox mindset is part of that. It's part of the mind of a lean thinker. And kind of continuing with this, you know, kind of covering what we did last year, kind of a segue, but also leading into this year. We talked about this a little bit, but Rachel and I have been doing we met several times in the course of doing this. Thank you again, Rachel, as you're so busy wrapping up your whole career. It's been great to spend time learning about this, we've read a lot, and we've learned that there's been, dealing with being befuddled by a paradox has been explicitly part of the human condition for at least 2,500 years, going back to the Greeks, ancient China, Zen Buddhism, all the Zen koans, those are all built around paradox. And if the learner somehow chooses one or the other, then he's going to get smacked. And so it's when you learn to resolve those and see through that the apparent paradox, the contradictions, that you consider to be kind of making your way. And then Kierkegaard is such an important thinker to this Western view. So this either or mentality has just dominated so much of our thought for centuries, maybe especially Western, but not only. We see things in situations in black and white. There's a right solution, there's a wrong solution. No allowance for uncertainty. We are compelled to choose either or, to choose this or that. Often when we know it's not quite that simple. It can also be not just A or B or X or Y. So we have this paradox mindset. And Rachel, can you help us kind of break this down and understand what it is?
I can. Thank you, John. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the nature of paradoxes, and then we'll get into some examples about them. So when we think of paradoxes, we think traditionally of contradictions, but a paradox is a little bit more than just a contradiction. It persists over time. So it's not a one time or an instant of a contradiction. I think it's really important to recognize the interdependency of the two ends or three ends, or the different forces that are pulling away from each other, as shown in the contradictory. They are interdependent. And then individually, either end or each one of the alternatives may seem logical, but when we put them together, they appear irrational. And again, we'll talk a lot about a number of different examples that we have found, and hopefully you will find yourself at the end of this saying, oh my gosh, I am surrounded by paradoxes, and they will keep hitting you, and then you will be up at night trying to resolve them. But because of the nature of this, the nature of paradoxes, it leads to this level of discomfort when you're continuously surrounded by tensions and pulling forces, and where you want to try to bring them together and make logical sense out of them. So here I'm going to talk about paradoxes. Like I mentioned, they are everywhere. Probably one that everybody has heard of and everybody is familiar with is a work-life balance. We tend to think of that's a either or situation. I can either be at work or I can be, and I don't know, I live at work, or I'm alive at work. So I'm not sure why they think of it as a paradox, but there's a pull between the two, between taking care of your family and taking care of your employees. And then one of my favorites, if you look below that, is we often get the choice of picking two between your sanity and happy kids and a clean house. So that means if any of you are parents and you have kids, particularly maybe younger ones, maybe even older ones, or if you've been a kid and you had a parent, which I think that covers pretty much everybody listening in, you can either have happy kids and your sanity, but then your house is a mess, or you can keep your house clean and keep your sanity, but then your kids are maybe a little bit upset because you're constantly reminding them to clean their rooms and things like that. So it's this tension between these three. So paradoxes, they're not limited to just two sides. They can be three-sided. We haven't really drawn the 4, 5, and 6 sides. But then the one on the right, this one is very near and dear to my heart recently, as I'm wrapping up my career and then preparing for this and getting ready to move from one state to another state, and then throw in some holidays and a vacation. But I want to sleep, but I have to work, and I want to work, but I'm so exhausted I have to sleep. So how do you balance those? When we move to kind of a little bit deeper thinking about paradoxes, John, do you want to talk to us about this?
Sure. So see, since I don't have the same problem you do of not being able to sleep, I'm not dealing with retiring. I'm happy not to have that particular paradox. But again, we did quite a bit of searching around and reading together. We found one of the things we found was some research by this Harvard University psychiatrist. You can find in this book about creativity and madness. You interviewed a bunch of Nobel laureates, and you analyzed, the work of a lot of famous thinkers. And what he found was each revolutionary thinker has spent a lot of time actively conceiving multiple opposites or antitheses simultaneously. One of the most famous of all time, can an object be at rest and moving at the same time? This kind of drove Einstein crazy, I guess. First thinking it can't, and then recognizing that it can. Another famous example of working from that, continuing from that, was Niels Bohr, when he tried to reconcile the ways that energy acted like both waves and particles. They existed simultaneously, even though they could not be observed together. It was that train of thought then that really led to a deeper understanding of what we now think of as quantum mechanics. So it's around, and there are smart people thinking about it, and that's a great thing. But to wrestle it to the ground then a little bit. So what? That's wonderful, but again, to bring it back to home, and literally home, as Rachel was talking about, but also then to work. Again, one of the reasons that I wanted Rachel to join me this year is because she's been part of a group. There's a large group here in the U.S. that's been thinking about how can we think of lean thinking in the 21st century, in the 2020s. There are so many more people, organizations that could benefit from that, from lean thinking, that are not. So are things that we could do in terms of how we articulate it. And then Rachel became part of a subgroup that started to explore what is this thing? How do we get a definition of what lean is? And where did that take you, Rachel, when you did that?
So yeah, as John mentioned, I was part of there were about a dozen of us, and we were tasked with, what is this that we're talking about? So whether you want to call it defining lean or what is lean. And we started first with gathering some of what was already out there, what definitions were out there, what models were out there. And we talked about that for a little bit. And then we started to try to frame our own. And I worked with Eric Olson, and he and I met, we called it the tiny working group. So we had the small working group, the tiny working group, and then the regular working group. And he and I would meet, and we started first with, well, lean is this, and we would define it. And then it would come, he would jump into, well, but we also have to explain what lean is not. So lean is not just for manufacturing, it's kind of for everything. So then we took that back to the working group, and we started to toss that around. And then as somebody would say, well, lean is this, somebody else would come back and say, yes, but it's also that. So then we became to the lean is this, yet that statements. And there are a few here, and call these paradox statements. I think we ended up with 12 or 13 of them. I've put a few of the more popular, or the ones that resonated with more people. So customer focused yet employee empowering. And I'm not going to go through all of these, but lean is driven by delivering value to the customer, yet focuses on empowering and engaging employees. So we want to, again, it's not that we want just the customer happy or we want just the employees, it's the two together. So we want to make sure that we're doing the both and part of that. It's
Sorry
respectful
to
yet
interrupt,
challenging.
Rachel. I just wanted to let you know, John Shook, he just had a power surge at his house, and so he was kicked off the space, but he is jumping back in. So if you don't see him come on, he should be here in just a minute or two.
I'm just going to keep rolling. We'll figure it out. This is, I structured yet flexible. Yes, we have a presentation here, but I'm going to be very flexible with the delivery of it. So just
all right, we'll get him back on as soon as we can.
And then the last one is stop yet flow. If you think about the and-on and the production lines, that lean requires you to stop immediately to address problems. Yet it enables unsurpassed efficiency, productivity, and flow. And it's because we're highlighting those problems or escalating those problems that we do allow the flow to continue. So this was our group of lean. And back in 2008, there was a book that was written by Asano, Shimizu, and Takeuchi, and they studied Toyota specifically. And basically they're calling it contradictions. I still prefer to refer to them as paradoxes, but we can call them contradictions. And they went to 11 different countries. They interviewed over 200 individuals that were from line workers all the way up to executives, and came up with these 6 different contradictions or paradoxes that lean operates from. And there are a couple that I think are really impactful, and I won't go through all of them just out of respect for time, but moving gradually yet also taking big leaps. So if you think about how Toyota introduced operations in the US, they started very slowly with NUMMI, and I wish John was here because he could talk about his experience, but that's okay. But then when you talk about big leaps, if you think about the Prius, that's a very broad, big leap for not just Toyota, but for the automotive industry in general, of going from internal combustion engines to hybrids and things like that. Number 5, I love this one, is respecting the bureaucratic hierarchy, yet allowing freedom to dissent. So it's a very structured organization, yet there's a challenge the status quo aspect to it. And I see John has joined us again. So John, I was talking about how we are structured in our presentation, yet we are flexible in our delivery. So ready to carry on. Another book that we found very helpful was the Smith-Lewis Both And book, Both And Thinking. So again, if we talk about the either or the this or that, there's the this yet that we came up with. This is a little bit more of the both and thinking, but that leads us to kind of this balance between these alternatives or these tensions or these forces that are pulling at each other. So we want to make sure that you guys have references if you want to refer to them later. They're available here. So based on our research, which again included some books, some articles, a lot of dialogue between John and myself, we came up with a hypothesis that people and or organizations that can navigate the tensions to both and thinking flourish over time. And this is also what was found in the Extreme Toyota book, that's one of the reasons that Toyota, who, you know, if you look at the specifics of it, should have failed, but has flourished rather. So now, how do we make this thinking? How do we make this thinking useful? Ella Myron Spector, and I'll refer to her as Ella because that's a lot easier to say, has done a lot of studies on paradox thinking and how to develop the mindset. She did a number of different studies where priming the participants with a paradox mindset, either by giving them paradox statements or by having them come up with paradox statements and just getting their mindset thinking of paradoxes, and found that then when they were given some creative problem solving or relationship tests of finding commonality among words and things like that, and then solving creative problems, that the 35% of the paradoxical thinkers found correct solutions compared to 21% of a control group. So just this simple priming provided really beneficial results for that. So, and then also how else to make it useful is, can a paradox mindset, again, one that avoids these opposite either or, you know, the different solutions, can it be nurtured? Can it be developed and cultivated? So Myron Spector imply a framework of simple steps or phrases. So first is to reshape the question. So don't think of the either or, reshape it to come up with more of a common or both and solution. Keep a distance from the problem. The third one is the one that I really like, is the identify different, even seemingly opposite solutions, views, and perspectives. So really looking at it from different angles, differentiate and integrate. So when you look at the different tensions, kind of pull them apart and look at them individually, and then look at where the commonalities are. I keep seeing a Venn diagram in my mind. And then finally, aiming to learn to accept conflict. So this again pulls into the emotional side of paradoxes and the discomfort that people may feel. So John, I see you're back now. You want to jump in?
Okay, let me just make sure. Can you hear me? And I don't know if you can see me or not.
I can see you. I can hear you. You're
Okay,
good.
great. I'm using my iPhone. I had a power outage here, so no Wi-Fi, but my phone is working. So the idea here is that we can repeat this experiment. We can do this. We can do the exact same thing that she did in her study. It's these steps, and Rachel's going to take us through it. We kind of gone through it to modify it, to make it something that's very doable for us. But the next time you and colleagues sit down to do work on a problem, begin by asking a member to write down 3 paradoxical statements, or show the lean statements that Rachel went through earlier. Frame the potential solutions to your problem as paradoxical opposites, and then be explicit to frame the entire exercise as an experiment. Write it down. Ask the team later then how they felt if they came up with newer, better ideas. Reflect that over time, you may be able to approach problems differently. So Rachel, you want to pick it up here again?
Sure, I can pick it up here. So again, this is the paradox of the mind, the paradox mindset exercise. So rather than charging a team to come up with a plan to achieve XYZ target condition, ask them first to consider the paradox, consider paradoxes first, and they don't need to be related to the problem that you're trying to solve. One of the examples that Byron Spector gives is sitting can be more tiring than standing. And if you think about that and you really think about it, and back to the work-life balance and the triangle of the clean house and the happy kids and the sanity. And so just start thinking about those things, and it really exercises your brain so that then you can go into the next stage. So start with paradox exercises. You can do it one way or the other. You can prime them with sharing some with them if they're very new to it, or you can challenge them to write their own statements. And then frame solutions to the problem that you're working on as paradoxical opposites to experiment with, aiming for a third way. So again, there's this idea, there's that idea, and then there's this other idea that is the both and. And then work through potential solutions that can be implemented as learning trials. Again, as John said, we want to experiment. And when you think about the paradox mindset, when you can try it, it can be used anytime you're doing problem solving. And there's, a lot of people on this this call here. So whether you use A3 or TBP or 5Y or 4 types of problems, Toyota Kata, they're all listed there, but whatever methodology you use. And I challenge you, anytime you feel a discomfort, take a step back and pause and think, is there a paradox here? Is there a tension that I'm trying to resolve? And can I think of it in a other idea? And then make it standard practice to approach problems and frame them and countermeasures as experiments, aiming to come up with these novel solutions that lead to the other ideas, the both and approach problems with more of a experimental mindset. So when we think about lean thinking, and this is a common image I think many of you have seen, is that you think of the optimist and they look at it as the glass is half full. And then you think of the pessimist and they're like, ooh, the glass is half empty. And when the lean thinker comes across this, their question becomes, why is the glass twice as big as it should be? So this is where you employ the principle of just enough-ing. Which I know enough-ing is not a real word, but I like it, and I would encourage the use of that. And so practice of questioning and exploring, not just naming and defining, and never accept either or, pursue both and challenge to find a third way with that. John, do you want to take this, or you want me to just keep rolling?
Yeah, well, I could jump in just a little bit. So just extending exactly what Rachel was saying. So here's an example of an A3 as a dialogue. I think you've all seen it, but really it's a dialogue with questions just in 7 boxes. And you could ask, just imagine the next time that you're working on one of these in a team, where does paradox fit in? Where might it fit in just in the usual natural course of things? And we were thinking about doing this as an exercise here today, Rachel. We may not really have time for that due to my, power outage here, kind of set us back a little bit. But I would challenge anyone that's with us today, though, just to think of this, A3 template or any A3 you've worked on and say, where do you find paradox? And I think as Rachel and I discussed this, you could find it anywhere. You can find it all throughout. But I think especially the place where it's important is to think of how you can bring it to, you don't want to choose resolving a paradox as your problem to solve. Okay, it's going to be underlying some problem to solve. It's something that when you're unpacking your problem in the analysis, when you're working through countermeasures, you can use the same process that Rachel just introduced to come up with countermeasures that seem to be in opposite of each other, and think of how you could resolve those, perhaps through some trials. And then as you have your iterative implementation plan, how can you be watching out for where paradox may be tripping you up? So throughout the analysis and developing countermeasures, putting it into place your plan, but also the very last part where you can recognize that paradox is probably still going to be a part of the situation that you leave as you move on to the next problem that you're going to solve. So using this way of thinking about how we can bring paradox mindset into our work, the A3 could be a way that we could do that, Rachel.
And this is another way. So if you look at, what John explained was kind of the more formal problem solving, but we encounter problems every day, all day, and we're constantly working through it in a more rapid problem solving process. So we can also use paradox thinking. And again, if we had more time, we'd have you throw it in the Q&A, but where in this on the daily on the fly problem solving or on the shop floor problem solving do we use paradox mindset? Again, it's the worker will identify the problem and signal that there's a problem. The manager immediate response. Managers are constantly, or team leader, they're constantly pulled in multiple directions. They have to keep the line running yet fix the problem. That's like the number one paradox here. And then when they start to look at the potential solutions, identifying, can we fix it now or do we fix the root cause of it, and balancing that. So here's a summary, and I'm going to go through this rather quickly, but as we talked about, we've gone through a lot of as an individual, how to develop a paradox mindset. To help gather those different perspectives, seek out devil's advocates, seek out those people who often disagree with you or offer alternative opinions that you're not familiar with or comfortable with. Identify tensions and recognize the discomfort. So again, when you get that gut feeling, then dig in to find out what the paradox is. The differentiate and integrate, and then experiment and reflect. And then on the right side is as a leader, because we all need to develop the mindset in ourselves, but yet as a leader, we want to develop it in others. So the first is model paradox thinking. And that should be explicit as you talk through it with your team. Encourage open dialogue, provide training, foster the emotional resilience, and promote experimentation and learning.
Okay, a couple of quick things here that kind of the ultimate paradox really is how we think about leadership. There's the old theory X and theory Y manager, or the dictator do it my way and the empowerment do it your way. And we don't want either of those. We want a third way. And if we look at the way we think about leadership, it is indeed something else where we refuse the either or contradiction. And however you think of the lean style or whatever style you want to attribute the leadership in your company to follow me and we'll figure it out together. Or sometimes I like to think of it in terms of lead as if you have no power, which was what Gary Convis learned when he was at NUMMI. And we could call this even kind of a new, neither theory Z nor theory X. It's a new theory Z, kind of theory Z prime. And so paradox is everywhere, including even here. So if we stop the slide share now, I think, yep. Rachel, we can kind of get back together. And again, I hope everyone can see me. I can see you. I see me there. And so I don't think you have any paradox now, Rachel, with what's happening. You are going to end your career with Toyota tomorrow, begin a new one. But I guess there probably is some paradox in your life, some contradictions and things you'll have to not just balance, right? You want to embrace it all, I think is what
Yes.
you want to do.
And
Again, you
I
don't like the
found a
idea of
way-
balance. You want to embrace it all.
Yeah, I found a way to make it to my retirement
Guys,
party yet do this presentation. So
That's right.
Rachel, John. Hello.
Thank you, Christopher. Thank you, Christopher.
hi, Christopher.
Thank you. Thank you.